Kepler stood on the observation deck of mining station Omega-7, watching the twin suns of Kepler 442b set over the rocky horizon. His thick, armored skin reflected the orange light like polished metal. As a Valorian warrior, he had fought in 12 major battles across 3 star systems. His people were known throughout the galaxy as the finest soldiers money could hire. Today, he felt useless. The mining station was supposed to be safe. It sat on a planet rich in rare metals, far from any known hostile territories. The crew was small, only 30 beings from 6 different species. Most were miners and engineers. The defense force was tiny, himself, 2 Krellian guards, and 3 humans from something called the Terran Colonial Marines. Kepler had never worked with humans before. He had heard stories, of course. They came from a small blue planet on the edge of civilized space. They were new to the galactic community, barely 200 years since first contact. Most species didn't think much of them. Looking at them now, Kepler could see why. The 3 humans sat in the station's small cantina, playing some sort of card game. They looked so fragile. Their skin was soft and pink, with no natural armor or protective scales. They were shorter than Kepler and much thinner. One of them, Sergeant Chun, according to his uniform, couldn't weigh more than half what Kepler did. The other 2 were even smaller. Private Williams looked like he was barely out of childhood, with pale skin and nervous eyes. Corporal Martinez was dark-skinned and quiet, but he moved like he was always tired. All 3 wore environmental suits, even inside the station. Their home planet must have been very different from this one. Weak creatures from a weak world, Kepler thought. The alarm started screaming at 0347 station time. Kepler was in his quarters, but he was dressed and armed within seconds. Years of training had taught him to sleep light in dangerous places. He ran toward the command center, his heavy boots ringing on the metal floors. The station commander, a nervous Centauri named Vexel, was already at his post. His 6 eyes were wide with fear as he stared at the sensor displays. "What is it?" Kepler demanded. "Ships," Vexel whispered. 15, maybe 20 of them. They just dropped out of hyperspace. Kepler looked at the screen. The ships were sleek and black, with the curved hulls and energy weapons that could only mean one thing. "Krikstar," he growled. The Krikstar were raiders from the dark regions beyond the galactic rim. They lived for war and violence. They took no prisoners and left no survivors. Kepler had fought them twice before. Both times, he had barely escaped alive. "Sir." The human sergeant had arrived, along with his 2 subordinates. "What's our situation?" Kepler turned to look at Chun. The human's voice was calm, professional. No fear. Either he was very brave or very stupid. 20 Krikstar raiders, Kepler said. "They'll be here in 10 minutes. We have 6 defenders and 30 civilians." Chun nodded. "What's our defensive capability?" 2 plasma cannons, basic shields, standard hull armor. Kepler's voice was grim. "Against 20 raiders? We have perhaps 1 chance in 100. So we make that chance count," Chun said simply. Kepler stared at him. The human wasn't joking. He actually thought they could win. "Positions," Kepler ordered. "Krellian guards to the upper gun platforms. Humans." He paused. Where could he put such fragile beings? "Take the lower corridor. Try to slow them down when they board." "Copy that," Chun said. He turned to his team. "Williams Martinez, you heard him. Let's move." The 3 humans ran off toward the lower levels. Kepler watched them go, feeling like he was sending children to fight monsters. The first wave hit 5 minutes. Later, Krikstar fighters screamed down from orbit, their weapons lighting up the station's shields. The energy barriers flickered and sparked under the assault. Kepler was at the main plasma cannon, returning fire as best he could. One fighter exploded in a ball of flame. Then another. But there were too many. The shields failed. The Krigstar fighters switched to boarding pods, small, armored capsules that slammed into the station's hull like bullets. Each pod carried 5 warriors, and Kethver counted at least 8 impacts. 40 Krigstar raiders, now inside the station. The first group came through the main airlock. Kethver met them with his plasma rifle, the weapon's blue bolts cutting through their armor. Krigstar were tough, with thick hides and cybernetic implants. But concentrated plasma would kill anything. He dropped 3 before the rest, found cover. The battle raged through the main corridor for 20 minutes. Kethver and the 2 Krellians held their ground, but more pods kept landing. More raiders kept coming. Then he heard something strange from the lower level. Human voices, shouting commands. Williams, left corridor. Got it. Martinez, watch the junction. Kethver frowned. The humans were still alive? He had expected them to be dead within minutes. A Krigstar raider came around the corner, weapon raised. Kethver shot him center mass, the plasma bolt punching through armor and flesh. As the raider fell, Kethver could hear more fighting from below. Explosions, weapon fire, and still human voices giving orders. One of the Krellian guards fell, a Krigstar energy beam burning through his chest. Kethver was forced back, step by step. The raiders were pushing forward, gaining ground. Sergeant Chun, he called into his communicator. Report. Still here, sir, came the reply. Chen's voice was steady, unworried. We've got the lower level locked down. Locked down? How were 3 humans holding against trained Krigstar warriors? Another explosion echoed from below. This time, it sounded like it came from the raider side. Sir, Chun's voice again. We're seeing movement in Section C7. Looks like they're trying to flank you. Kethver checked his tactical display. Section C7 was supposed to be empty. How did the humans know about enemy movement there? Confirmed, he radioed back. How did you spot that? Private Williams jury-rigged one of the mining sensors into a motion detector. Chun replied. Basic stuff. Basic stuff? Kethver had been a soldier for 30 years, and he wouldn't have thought of that. The flanking group of raiders appeared exactly where Chun had predicted. But Kethver was ready for them. His plasma fire cut them down before they could establish position. As the first wave of attacks ended, Kethver realized something disturbing. The humans weren't just alive. They were winning their part of the battle. And they were doing it in ways that made no tactical sense. At least, no sense to a normal warrior. But maybe, Kethver thought as he checked his weapon's power level, humans weren't normal warriors at all. The second wave came 6 hours later. Kethver had used a break to tend his wounds and check the station's defenses. 3 dead Krellians, 1 damaged plasma cannon, and hole-filled corridors throughout the upper levels. The raiders had pulled back to their ships, but they would return. They always did. What puzzled him was the lower level. It was untouched. When Kethver went down to check on the humans, he found them in the maintenance bay, surrounded by pieces of mining equipment. Sergeant Chun was welding something that looked like a metal tube. Private Williams was connecting wires to what used to be a rock crusher. Corporal Martinez sat in the corner, drawing diagrams on a datapad. What are you doing? Kethver asked. Chun looked up from his welding. Improving our odds. That mining equipment is worth more than your annual salary. Kethver said. Dead miners don't need equipment. Williams said without looking up from his wiring. Kethver watched them work. In 6 hours, they had completely changed the lower level. Corridor walls had been opened to create new firing positions. Mining lights had been repositioned to blind attackers. Even the air recycling system had been modified, though Kethver couldn't figure out why. How many raiders did you kill in the first wave? he asked. 12, Martinez said from his corner. 12? Kethver couldn't believe it. I counted 40 that boarded the station. 12 down here, Chun clarified. You and the Krellians got the rest upstairs. Kethver had killed 8 raiders himself. The Krellians had accounted for maybe 10 more before they died. That left 10 unaccounted for. Where are the other 10? He asked. The humans exchanged looks. Williams actually smiled. Trapped in Storage Bay 4, Chun said. We cut off their air supply. They'll be unconscious in another hour. You took prisoners? Information is useful, Martinez said, still drawing. We need to understand how they think. Kethver stared at him. In 30 years of fighting, he had never bothered to study his enemies beyond basic tactical data. You shot them. They died. You moved on. But the humans were different. The alarm started screaming again. This time, 25 pods hit the station. The Krigstar had brought more warriors, but this time, the humans were ready. Kethver ran to his position at the upper plasma cannon, expecting to fight the same desperate battle as before. Instead, he found the corridors eerily quiet. His tactical display showed raider groups moving through the station, but they were moving slowly, cautiously. Chun, he called on the radio. Report. We're channeling them into kill zones, came the reply. Stand by. Channeling them? How could 3 humans channel 60 trained raiders? The answer came 5 minutes later, when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in blood-red shadows. Kethver heard confused shouts from the raider groups. Then the sound of explosions from the lower levels. Power's back in 30 seconds, Williams announced over the radio. When the lights returned, Kethver checked his tactical display. 6 raider signals had disappeared. The rest were no longer moving in organized groups. They had spread out, confused and wary. How? Kethver asked. Pressure mines made from rock crusher charges, Chun explained. We placed them where the raiders would take cover when the lights went out. How did you know where they would take cover? People act predictably when they're scared, Martinez said over the radio. Even Krigstar. The raiders regrouped and pushed forward again. But every time they tried to advance, something went wrong. Floors collapsed under their feet. Ceiling panels fell on their heads. Corridors filled with smoke from damaged air recyclers. None of it was lethal, but all of it was confusing. And while the raiders dealt with broken equipment and falling debris, the humans picked them off one by one with precise weapon fire. Kethver began to understand what he was watching. The humans weren't fighting like warriors. They were fighting like hunters. Patient, clever hunters who had turned the entire station into a trap that, by the time the second wave ended, 40 more raiders were dead. The humans had lost no one. Impossible, Kethver muttered as he reviewed the battle data. But the impossible was about to become routine. The third wave came, 12 hours later. This time, the Krigstar tried a different approach. Instead of boarding pods, they used cutting beams to slice holes directly through the station's hull. The humans were ready for that too. Williams had rigged proximity, sensors to every potential breach point. The moment a cutting beam touched the hull, alarms warned the defenders exactly where the raiders would come through. More than that, the humans had prepared special surprises for each breach point. Some corridors were filled with foam that hardened instantly when exposed to air. Others had been rigged with industrial magnets that would grab onto any metal equipment the raiders carried. One group of raiders found themselves stuck to the wall by their own weapons and armor, helpless as Chun walked up and disarmed them one by one. This is not how war works, Kethver said when the third wave was over. No, Chun agreed, checking his weapon. This is how humans work. Kethver was beginning to see the difference. Most species fought with instinct or training. They had standard tactics, predictable responses, traditional strategies. Even the Krikstar, for all their savagery, followed recognizable patterns. The humans did something else entirely. They learned between each attack. They studied what had happened. They analyzed raider movements, weapon patterns, communication frequencies. They identified weaknesses and developed counters. More disturbing still, they improved their own tactics with each battle. What started as basic defensive positions became elaborate trap networks. Simple ambush points became complex kill zones with multiple layers of backup plans by the fourth wave. The humans weren't just defending anymore. They were experimenting. Williams had built something he called a railgun out of mining equipment and power cells. It fired chunks of metal so fast they went through raider armor like it was paper. Martinez had figured out how to hack into the raiders' communication system. He was feeding them false information, sending them into empty corridors and abandoned sections. Chun had developed what he called psychological warfare. He had rigged speakers throughout the station to play recordings of raider death screams at random intervals. The sounds echoed through the corridors, making the remaining raiders jumpy and paranoid. "Why are you doing this?" Kethver asked after the fourth wave was beaten back. "Doing what?" Chun replied, cleaning his improvised weapons. "Learning. Adapting. Most warriors fight the same way every time." Chun paused in his cleaning. "Most warriors don't care if their people live or die." "But you do?" "We're pack animals," Williams said from across the room. "We take care of our own." Kethver looked around the maintenance bay. In 3 days, the humans had turned it into something between a laboratory and a weapons factory. Every surface was covered with diagrams, equipment modifications, and tactical analyses. They weren't just fighting a battle anymore. They were studying war itself, learning how to be better at it with every passing hour. And that, Kethver realized with a chill running down his armored spine, was the most frightening thing he had ever seen. Day 4 brought silence. No attack came at dawn. No ships moved in orbit. The Krikstar fleet hung in space like sleeping predators, and Kethver didn't like it. He found the humans in their usual place, the maintenance bay that had become their command center. But something was different. The organized chaos of previous days was gone. Instead, the 3 humans sat perfectly still, staring at sensor displays. "What's happening?" Kethver asked. "They're planning something different," Chun said without looking away from the screen. "How do you know?" "Pattern analysis," Martinez replied. His voice was flat, emotionless. 4 waves, each 12 hours apart. Now nothing for 18 hours. They've changed strategy. Kethver looked at the displays. The raider ships had spread out, surrounding the planet. Maybe they're preparing to leave. Williams laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "They don't leave. Not until everyone's dead. Then what are they doing?" "Learning," Chun said. "Just like we are." The answer came 3 hours later. A single small ship broke away from the raider fleet. It headed not for the station, but for the mining complex 5 kilometers to the east. The complex was supposed to be empty. All personnel had been evacuated to the main station when the raids began. "Reconnaissance mission," Kethver said, watching the ship land. "They're looking for information about our defenses." "Or hostages," Martinez added quietly. "The complex is empty," Kethver insisted. "We evacuated everyone." But even as he said it, he remembered that one of the mining teams had been working a deep shaft when the evacuation order came. Had they made it out? Chen was already checking personnel records. His face went pale. "Team 7, he said. 4 miners working level 12 of shaft C. They were supposed to evacuate yesterday." "Supposed to?" Kethver asked. "Communication's been down to that sector since the 3rd wave. We assumed they got out." Williams was already moving, grabbing weapons and equipment. "We go get them." "Negative," Kethver ordered. It's a trap. The raiders want us to leave the station. Maybe, Chun said, standing up. But if Team 7 is alive, we can't leave them. 4 miners versus the mission, Cathver said. The logical choice is clear. The 3 humans stared at him with expressions he had never seen before. Their eyes were hard, cold, completely focused. Logic has nothing to do with it, Chun said. They left an hour later. Cathver tried to stop them. He explained that it was tactically unsound, that they were needed at the station, that 4 lives weren't worth the risk of losing the whole defensive position. The humans listened politely, then prepared to leave anyway. This is insane, Cathver said, as they checked their weapons. This is human, Williams replied. They took a maintenance vehicle, something designed to carry equipment across the rocky terrain between the station and the mining complex. Cathver watched from the observation deck as the small vehicle bounced across the landscape towards certain danger. He had fought alongside many species over the years. Krellians would sacrifice individuals for the greater good without hesitation. Valorians, like himself, understood that honor sometimes required accepting losses. Even the peaceful Zentari knew that survival meant making hard choices. But humans? Humans would risk everything for pack members. Even miners they barely knew. The vehicle reached the mining complex just as the sun was setting. Cathver tracked their progress through long-range sensors as they entered the facility. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then the explosion started. Energy weapons lit up the complex like a fireworks display. The single Krikstar ship was joined by 2 more. Whatever had been a reconnaissance mission was now a full assault. Chun. Report, Cathver called over the radio. Static answered him. Williams. Martinez, anyone. Report. More static. The battle raged for 2 hours. Through his sensors, Cathver could see figures moving through the complex. Human heat signatures mixed with the colder traces of Krikstar raiders. The fighting moved from building to building, level to level. Then, suddenly, silence. The Krikstar ships lifted off and returned to orbit. The complex went dark. Cathver spent the next 4 hours trying to raise the humans on radio. Nothing. He considered taking a vehicle and going after them, but his training held him back. Someone had to defend the station. Dawn brought answers he didn't want. A single figure appeared on the horizon, walking slowly across the rocky ground. As it got closer, Cathver could see it was Chun, supporting someone else. Martinez, wounded but alive. They reached the station 3 hours later. Cathver met them at the airlock. Williams? He asked. Chun's face was stone. Captured. 4th level, Shaft 7. They were waiting for us. The miners? Dead. Killed hours before we arrived. It was a trap. Cathver helped them to the medical bay. Martinez had taken an energy beam to the shoulder, but would live. Chun seemed uninjured, but something in his eyes had changed. I'm sorry, Cathver said as the medical systems worked on Martinez. You were right to try. I should have helped. Chun looked at him with those new cold eyes. It's not over. What do you mean? Williams is alive. They took him alive for a reason. Interrogation, Cathver said. They want information about our defenses. Maybe, or maybe they want to break us. Chun's voice was flat, empty of emotion. Make us watch while they torture him. Psychological warfare. If that's true, then we can't help him. Any rescue attempt would be suicide. Chun nodded slowly. Probably. But Cathver saw something in the human's expression that made his blood run cold. Chun wasn't accepting Williams's fate. He was calculating. Chun, Cathver said carefully, you can't be thinking of going after him. No, Chun replied. I'm not thinking about it. He turned to leave the medical bay, then paused at the door. I'm planning it. After Chun left, Cuthbert sat with Martinez as the medical systems worked. The wounded human was conscious, but groggy from pain medication. "He's going to try to rescue Williams," Cuthbert said. Martinez nodded weakly. "Of course he is. It's impossible. Williams is on one of their ships. In space. There's no way to reach him. Doesn't matter. It's a suicide mission." Martinez turned his head to look at Cuthbert directly. Despite the pain medication, his eyes were clear and focused. "You don't understand," he said. "Williams isn't just our teammate. He's Pac. We don't abandon Pac, even if it means certain death. Especially then." Cuthbert left the medical bay feeling disturbed in ways he couldn't explain. He had seen humans fight brilliantly, adapt constantly, and overcome impossible odds. But this was different. This wasn't tactical thinking or adaptive strategy. This was something deeper, more primitive. Something that made humans dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with weapons or intelligence. He found Chun in the maintenance bay, surrounded by technical manuals and star charts. The human was planning something impossible with the same methodical patience he had used to plan the station's defense. "Chun," Cuthbert said, "this has to stop." "No," Chun replied without looking up. "It doesn't." And watching the human work, studying ship designs and orbital mechanics with the focus of someone planning a miracle, Cuthbert realized something that chilled him to his core. Chun wasn't going to abandon Williams, no matter what the cost. And if Chun died trying, Martinez would try next. And if both humans died, every other human in the galaxy would remember their names and spend the rest of eternity hunting down the Crickstar responsible. For the first time in his career as a warrior, Cuthbert was truly afraid, not of the enemy they were fighting, but of the allies fighting beside him. Williams died on day 6. The Crickstar broadcasted on all frequencies, just as Chun had predicted. They wanted the remaining humans to see their pack member tortured and broken. They wanted to break human morale with displays of cruelty. They succeeded, but not in the way they intended. Cuthbert was in the command center when the transmission came through. Williams appeared on screen, beaten and bloody, but still alive. A Crickstar commander spoke in their harsh language, demanding the humans surrender or watch their companions suffer. Chun and Martinez watched in complete silence. The torture lasted 3 hours. Williams never broke, never gave them information, never begged for mercy. At the end, when his heart finally stopped, the Crickstar commander looked directly into the camera. "This is the fate of all humans," the raider said in broken galactic standard. "Surrender now, or die slowly." The transmission ended. Cuthbert expected grief, rage, some kind of emotional breakdown. He had seen warriors react to the death of comrades before. There were always tears, or anger, or at least visible sadness. The human showed none of that. Chun sat back in his chair and closed his eyes for exactly 30 seconds. When he opened them again, his expression was calm, almost peaceful. Martinez nodded once, like Williams's death had confirmed something he already knew. "I'm sorry," Cuthbert said. "Williams was a good soldier." "Yes," Chun agreed. "He was. What do we do now?" Chun stood up and walked to the weapons locker. "Now we work. Work?" "The Crickstar made a mistake," Martinez said, his voice still weak from his injuries. "They showed us their ship's interior during the broadcast. Layout, security positions, crew quarters." Cuthbert stared at them. "You're still planning a rescue mission?" "Williams is dead. The rescue mission is over," Chun said, pulling on his armor. "Now, we start the punishment mission." "That's impossible. They're in space. We're stuck on this station. For now." Chun started checking his weapons with methodical precision. But not forever. Over the next 12 hours, Cuthbert watched the humans transform into something he had never seen before. They weren't grieving. They weren't even angry. They had become something far more dangerous. They had become patient. Chun spent hours analyzing the broadcast, studying every detail of the Krikstar ship's interior. He mapped corridors, identified weak points, cataloged every visible crew member. Martinez, despite his injuries, worked on technical specifications, determining power systems and life support configurations. They weren't planning a desperate assault. They were planning a methodical execution. "This will take time," Chun said when Kethver asked about their timeline. "Weeks, maybe months." "Months? The raiders will leave long before then." "No," Martinez said, looking up from his technical diagrams. "They won't. How can you be sure?" "Because we're going to make them stay." The next raider attack came 18 hours after Williams's death. But this time, the humans fought differently. Instead of defending the station, they focused on damaging raider equipment. Every shot was aimed at weapon systems, engines, communication arrays. They weren't trying to kill raiders anymore. They were trying to cripple their ships. When Krikstar boarding parties entered the station, they found corridors filled with strange obstacles. Adhesive foam that made movement difficult. Electromagnetic fields that scrambled their equipment. Sonic disruptors that caused disorientation and nausea. None of it was immediately lethal, but all of it was debilitating. The raiders who survived the assault stumbled back to their ships confused and sick. 3 of their vessels had sustained major damage to essential systems. What was the point of that? Kethver asked after the attack ended. "Attrition," Chun replied, studying sensor data from the damaged ships. "Every damaged system forces them to stay longer while repairs are made. Every sick raider reduces their effectiveness. You're trying to trap them here. We're trying to learn everything about them. Their tactics, their technology, their weaknesses. Every hour they stay gives us more data." Kethver began to understand the scope of what the humans were planning. This wasn't about defending the station anymore. This was about turning the entire system into a laboratory for studying. Krikstar capabilities. The raiders attacked again 2 days later. Again, the humans focused on non-lethal but debilitating tactics. Smoke that burned eyes and throats. Sonic weapons that caused temporary paralysis. Electromagnetic pulses that fried electronic equipment. More ships were damaged. More raiders were rendered temporarily unable to fight. And with each attack, the humans learned more. They figured out how Krikstar armor was constructed and developed weapons specifically designed to defeat it. They mapped communication protocols and began feeding false information into raider networks. They identified leadership hierarchies and started targeting specific commanders. After 2 weeks, the Krikstar fleet was still in the system, but barely functional. Half their ships needed major repairs. Most of their crew was operating at reduced efficiency due to repeated exposure to human non-lethal weapons. "They should retreat," Kethver said, watching the raider fleet struggle with basic coordination. "They can't," Martinez said. "Their pride won't let them." Krikstar never retreat from inferior species. "But they're losing." "Slowly," Chun agreed. "And that's the point." Kethver felt a chill of understanding. The humans weren't just winning this battle. They were documenting it. Every tactic, every weapon, every psychological pressure point was being recorded and analyzed. When this was over, humans would know everything about how Krikstar raiders fought, thought, and died. "How many human fleets know about this?" Kethver asked. "All of them," Chun said simply. "Real-time data transmission. Every human ship in the galaxy is learning what we're learning here." "That's impossible. The distances involved." "Quantum entanglement communicators," Martinez explained. "Standard human military equipment. What happens here is known on Earth 12 minutes later." The scope of it hit Kethver like a physical blow. This wasn't just 3 humans defending a mining station. This was 3 humans conducting a species-wide learning experiment, with every discovery instantly shared across an entire civilization. The Krikstar weren't just fighting Chun, Williams, and Martinez. They were fighting all of humanity in every battle, forever. Williams knew, Kethver said suddenly. When they captured him, he knew he was going to die. Yes. And he let them torture him anyway. Information gathering, Chun said without emotion. Williams learned about their interrogation techniques, their psychology, their ship's interior. Everything he experienced was transmitted back to us. He died for intelligence data. He died so that no other human would ever have to die the same way. Kethver stared at the tactical displays showing the crippled raider fleet. In 2 weeks, 3 humans had turned 20 elite warships into helpless scrap metal. Not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through patience, analysis, and methodical adaptation. And somewhere in human space, hundreds of other fleets were reviewing the data, learning the lessons, preparing for their own encounters with Krikstar raiders. What happens when this is over? Kethver asked. Chun looked at him with those cold, patient eyes that had replaced his earlier warmth. When this is over, Chun said, Krikstar raids on human territory become extinct. Standing in the command center of a damaged mining station, watching the slow death of an entire raider fleet, Kethver finally understood what he was witnessing. This wasn't war. This was evolution. And humanity was evolving into something that would make every other species in the galaxy very, very careful about who they chose as enemies. The siege ended on day 23, but not how Kethver expected. The Krikstar didn't retreat. They didn't surrender. They simply died, not from weapons fire or explosions, but from something far more systematic. Over 3 weeks, the humans had turned the mining system into a trap designed not just to kill raiders, but to study them while they died. The last Krikstar ship went dark at 0347 station time. Its life support had failed after repeated electromagnetic attacks. The crew was found days later, suffocated in their own vessel. Chun stood in the command center, reviewing final data logs with the same methodical patience he had shown throughout the siege. His report would be transmitted to human command within the hour. It's over, Kethver said. This part is over, Chun corrected. The real work is just beginning. Kethver didn't understand until the rescue ships arrived. 3 vessels dropped out of hyperspace, exactly 72 hours after the last raider died. 2 were standard evacuation transports. The third was something Kethver had never seen before, a human research vessel, equipped with laboratories and analysis equipment. The research team that disembarked was larger than the entire mining station crew. They immediately began collecting every piece of Krikstar technology, every weapon fragment, every scrap of biological material. They interviewed Chen and Martinez for 18 hours straight, recording every detail of every battle. Standard procedure, explained Dr. Sarah Kim, the research team leader. Every contact with hostile species generates a full analysis report. This data will be distributed to all human military units within 6 months. All of them? Kethver asked. Every ship, every station, every colonial defense force. By the time we're done, every human in the galaxy will know exactly how to defeat Krikstar raiders. Kethver watched the research team work with growing unease. They weren't just studying weapons and tactics. They were analyzing Krikstar biology, psychology, culture, and technology with scientific precision. One team dissected raider corpses to understand their physiology and identify vulnerable organs. Another group analyzed communication records to map Krikstar social hierarchies. A third team studied the raider ship designs to identify weaknesses in their construction. This is very thorough, Kethver said to Dr. Kim. We're thorough people, she replied. not looking up from her analysis of a Krikstar energy weapon. When humans encounter a threat, we make sure it stops being a threat permanently. By killing all of them? By understanding all of them. She finally looked at him, and Kethver saw the same cold patience in her eyes that he had learned to fear in chums. Dead enemies can't learn from their mistakes, but we can learn from their failures. 3 months later, Kethver received his new assignment. He was to serve as military advisor to a joint species trading post in the Vega system. Simple, routine, safe. He almost declined. Working with humans had changed him in ways he was still trying to understand. He had seen them fight, adapt, and overcome impossible odds through nothing more than patience and methodical analysis. But he had also seen something deeper, more disturbing. He had seen what humans did to species that threatened their pack. The Krikstar raids on human territory stopped completely 6 months after the siege. Not because the raiders had been defeated in battle, but because they had been studied out of existence. Human fleets began intercepting raider ships light years from any human settlement. They knew exactly when and where the raiders would appear, what tactics they would use, how their weapons functioned, and where their ships were most vulnerable. Every battle became a laboratory experiment with predetermined results. Within a year, Krikstar raids anywhere in human space became extinct. Not just reduced or discouraged, but completely eliminated. The raiders tried new tactics, different approaches, updated technology. None of it mattered. Humans had learned too much, but that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was what happened. Next, human fleets began appearing in non-human space, offering protection services to other species threatened by Krikstar raids. They shared their anti-raider knowledge freely, taught other militaries how to defeat Krikstar tactics, and provided advanced warning of incoming attacks. Within 5 years, Krikstar raiding as a way of life had become impossible galaxy-wide. Not just against humans, but against anyone humans chose to protect. An entire warrior culture had been analyzed, understood, and methodically driven to extinction. Kethver found himself thinking about Williams often. The young human had died horribly, but his death had become something larger. Every lesson learned from his torture, every detail observed during his final hours, had been weaponized into a species-wide response that eliminated the threat forever. Williams hadn't just died for his pack. He had died for every potential victim of Krikstar raids for the next 1,000 years. That was when Kethver truly understood what made humans different. Other species fought individual battles. They won or lost based on strength, tactics, or luck. When they won, they celebrated. When they lost, they retreated and tried again later. Humans fought learning experiences. Every battle, every death, every victory became data to be analyzed and shared. They didn't just want to win individual conflicts. They wanted to understand the fundamental principles of conflict itself, then use that knowledge to ensure they never faced the same threat twice. They were persistence predators, but not just in individual hunts. They were persistence predators across time, space, and generations. When they encountered a threat, they didn't just destroy it. They studied it, understood it, and developed permanent countermeasures that would protect not just themselves, but anyone they chose to ally with. The most terrifying part wasn't their intelligence or their adaptability. It was their patience. Humans didn't need to win every battle immediately. They were willing to take losses, study failures, and spend years developing perfect solutions. They thought in decades and centuries, not days and months. Kethver's final report to Valorian Command was classified at the highest levels. His recommendations were simple and absolute. Humanity should be considered our greatest ally, not because they are powerful, but because they are inevitable. When humans decide that something is a threat, that thing stops existing, not just as an immediate danger, but as a concept. The alternative to alliance with humanity is not war. War's end. The alternative is becoming the subject of human scientific curiosity, which is far worse than any death. Whatever we do, we must never, under any circumstances, give humans a reason to study us as a threat. The report was distributed to every major species in the galactic community within 6 months. It became the foundation of interspecies policy for the next century, because everyone who read it understood the same truth that Kethver had learned watching 3 humans defend a mining station. Humanity wasn't just another species competing for resources and territory. Humanity was evolution in action. They were what happened when intelligence, patience, and pack loyalty combined into something that could reshape the galaxy. One learned lesson at a time. And the most frightening part of all was that they were just getting started. In the depths of space. Human fleets continued their work, studying every hostile species they encountered, sharing data across their entire civilization, and slowly, methodically, inevitably becoming the apex predators of the entire galaxy. Not through conquest, through understanding. And once humans understood something completely, it could never threaten them again. That was the true meaning of fear, Kethver realized. Not the immediate terror of battle, but the slow, creeping understanding that somewhere out there was a species that would never stop learning, never stop adapting, and never, ever stop protecting their pack. No matter what the cost.